In the gilded halls of Thornfield Palace, where whispered secrets carry more weight than royal decrees, a single act of defiance would shatter generations of carefully maintained protocol. When Lady Isabella Ashworth made the unprecedented decision to bypass the established line of inheritance for the legendary Thornfield sapphires, she unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would expose long-buried family secrets, challenge the very foundations of royal tradition, and force three powerful women to confront the price of loyalty, ambition, and love. The sapphires weren't just jewels, they were symbols of power, legitimacy, and the unspoken bonds that held the monarchy together. But, sometimes, the most precious gifts come with the heaviest cost, and, in a world where every gesture is scrutinized and every decision carries consequences across generations, one woman's choice to follow her heart rather than tradition would prove that even the most established dynasties are built on foundations far more fragile than they appear. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Thornfield Palace like secrets refusing to be revealed, and Lady Isabella Ashworth felt the weight of history pressing against her shoulders as she made her way through the private corridors toward the Queen Dowager's chambers. In her hands, she carried a velvet-lined jewelry case that had remained untouched for 3 years, its contents representing more than mere gemstones and precious metals. The Thornfield sapphires had belonged to Queen Mother Eleanor, and, according to every protocol and tradition that governed their aristocratic world, they should have passed to the Queen Consort Victoria upon Eleanor's death. But Isabella had other plans. The decision had been brewing in her mind for months, growing stronger with each observation of the complex dynamics that governed her family. As Queen Mother Eleanor's closest confidant and the wife of Prince Alexander, Isabella occupied a unique position within the royal household. She had witnessed the subtle tensions, the careful maneuvering, and the unspoken resentments that simmered beneath the polished surface of palace life. Most importantly, she had seen how Princess Catherine, Alexander's daughter from his first marriage, had been overlooked time and again in favor of maintaining traditional hierarchies. Isabella's footsteps echoed softly against the marble floors as she recalled the conversation that had changed everything. It had been during one of Queen Mother Eleanor's final lucid moments, when the elderly monarch had grasped Isabella's hand with surprising strength and whispered words that contradicted every expectation. Eleanor had spoken of Catherine with a tenderness that surprised Isabella, describing the young woman as the true inheritor of the family's grace and wisdom. The Queen Mother had expressed regret about the rigid protocols that would prevent Catherine from receiving the recognition she deserved, particularly given Victoria's increasingly distant relationship with the family's charitable foundations and cultural initiatives. The sapphires themselves were legendary within royal circles. The centerpiece was a magnificent necklace featuring 9 perfectly matched cashmere sapphires, each stone representing one of the founding duchies that had united to form the modern kingdom. Accompanying the necklace were matching earrings, a delicate tiara, and several brooches, all crafted by the finest jewelers of the 19th century. But their value extended far beyond their monetary worth. The sapphires had been worn at every major state occasion for over a century, from coronations to diplomatic receptions, and they carried with them the accumulated weight of royal history. As Isabella approached the ornate double doors that led to Eleanor's former private study, she encountered Margaret Fairfield, the palace's head of household staff. Margaret had served the royal family for over 30 years, and her discretion was legendary. The older woman's eyes immediately focused on the jewelry case, and Isabella could see the recognition dawning in her expression. "Your ladyship," Margaret said with a respectful curtsy, "might I inquire about your intentions this morning?" Isabella paused, appreciating Margaret's delicate way of asking what everyone would soon be wondering. The staff had been expecting the sapphires to be formally transferred to Queen Consort Victoria's collection, and any deviation from that expectation would create ripples throughout the palace. "I'm fulfilling Queen Mother Eleanor's final wishes," Isabella replied, her voice carrying a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "There are certain family matters that require attention." Margaret's expression remained carefully neutral, but Isabella could sense the woman's understanding. Margaret had also witnessed the subtle dynamics that played out between the family members, and she was astute enough to recognize when significant changes were in motion. The study itself remained exactly as Eleanor had left it, with its rich burgundy wallpaper, floor-to-ceiling bookcases filled with first-edition volumes, and the massive oak desk that had served as the Queen Mother's command center for decades. Portraits of previous monarchs gazed down from the walls, their expressions seeming to judge every decision made within these walls. Isabella set the jewelry case on the desk and opened it, allowing the sapphires to catch the morning light streaming through the tall windows. The stones seemed to pulse with their own inner fire, deep blue depths that had witnessed generations of royal celebrations and state ceremonies. Isabella reached out to touch the main necklace, feeling the cool weight of the gold setting and the perfect smoothness of the central stone. She thought about Princess Catherine, who had inherited her grandmother Eleanor's intelligence and compassion but had been consistently overshadowed by the complexities of royal protocol. Catherine had spent the past year dedicated to expanding the family's charitable work, particularly focusing on educational initiatives for underprivileged children. She had shown remarkable skill and diplomacy during recent state visits, earning praise from foreign dignitaries who found her approachable yet dignified. Most importantly, she had maintained a close relationship with Queen Mother Eleanor during the elderly monarch's final years, often spending hours reading to her or simply providing companionship when the formal requirements of court life became overwhelming. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted Isabella's contemplation. She recognized the confident stride of Queen Consort Victoria even before the woman appeared in the doorway. Victoria was an imposing figure, tall and elegant with silver hair always arranged in a perfect chignon. She had married into the royal family 15 years earlier, bringing with her the pedigree of one of the oldest noble houses in the neighboring kingdom. Her marriage to King Richard had been primarily political, designed to strengthen diplomatic ties, but she had adapted to her role with remarkable efficiency. "Isabella," Victoria said, her voice carrying the precise diction that characterized all her public appearances. "I was told you were handling Eleanor's personal effects. How thoughtful of you to take on such a responsibility." There was something in Victoria's tone that suggested she already suspected the true nature of Isabella's mission. The Queen Consort's eyes immediately located the open jewelry case, and Isabella watched as her expression shifted almost imperceptibly from polite interest to sharp attention. "The sapphires," Victoria continued, moving closer to the desk. "I had wondered when arrangements would be made for their transfer. Eleanor was so fond of these pieces." Isabella felt the moment arriving sooner than she had anticipated. She had hoped to complete her task before encountering any family members, but Victoria's presence forced her to confront the situation directly. "Queen Mother Eleanor left specific instructions regarding these pieces," Isabella said, her words carefully chosen. "She wanted them to go to someone who would honor their legacy in a particular way." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly, the only outward sign of her surprise. "I see. And those instructions were?" "She wanted Catherine to have them." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Victoria's expression remained composed, but Isabella could see the rapid calculations occurring behind her eyes. The Queen Consort was too experienced in palace politics to react with immediate anger or protest, but the implications of Isabella's statement were clearly profound. "Catherine," Victoria repeated slowly. "That's quite unexpected. The sapphires have traditionally passed to the senior female member of the royal family." "Eleanor was very specific about her wishes," Isabella replied. "She felt that Catherine embodied the values and dedication that the sapphires represent." Victoria moved to one of the tall windows, gazing out at the formal gardens where groundskeepers were tending to the elaborate flower beds. When she turned back to face Isabella, her expression had shifted to one of careful consideration rather than opposition. "You understand the precedent this establishes," Victoria said. "Royal jewelry traditionally follows established lines of inheritance. Deviating from that protocol raises questions about other family assets and responsibilities." Isabella had anticipated this argument. Eleanor was clear that this was her personal decision, based on her assessment of who would best represent the family's interests. She wasn't challenging established protocols, but rather exercising her prerogative regarding her personal collection. The distinction was important but subtle. Queen Mother Eleanor's jewelry had been considered part of her personal estate rather than crown assets, giving her more flexibility in determining their distribution. However, the practical implications were significant because the sapphires had become so closely associated with formal royal occasions. "Has Catherine been informed of this decision?" Victoria asked. "Not yet. I wanted to ensure that all arrangements were properly handled before making any announcements." Victoria nodded slowly, and Isabella could see her working through the various implications and potential responses. The Queen Consort was known for her strategic thinking, and she would undoubtedly be considering how this development might affect her own position within the family hierarchy. "Eleanor always had a special affection for Catherine," Victoria acknowledged. "The girl has certainly shown dedication to the family's charitable work." There was something in Victoria's tone that suggested she was testing Isabella's resolve rather than genuinely opposing the decision. Isabella realized that Victoria might be more supportive than initially expected, perhaps recognizing that Catherine's growing prominence could benefit the entire family's reputation. Catherine has plans to expand the educational foundation, Isabella offered. She believes the sapphires could serve as a powerful symbol during fundraising events and diplomatic occasions. Interesting, Victoria replied. That shows considerable strategic thinking. The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the study door. Margaret Fairfield appeared with a silver tea service, setting it on a small table near the windows. The interruption provided both women with an opportunity to step back from their discussion and consider their positions. As Margaret poured the tea, Isabella reflected on the complexity of the situation she had initiated. By choosing to honor Queen Mother Eleanor's wishes, she was potentially disrupting established hierarchies and creating new precedents for how family assets would be distributed. But she was also recognizing Catherine's contributions and providing her with tools that could enhance her ability to serve the family's interests. Victoria accepted her teacup and settled into one of the leather chairs that flanked the small table. "Tell me more about Eleanor's specific instructions," she said. "I want to understand her reasoning." Isabella joined her, grateful for the opportunity to explain the deeper motivations behind Eleanor's decision. She described the many conversations she had witnessed between the Queen Mother and Catherine, particularly during the final months when Eleanor's health had been declining. Catherine had shown remarkable patience and compassion, often sacrificing her own social engagements to ensure that Eleanor didn't spend her evenings alone. Eleanor spoke often about legacy, Isabella explained. Not just the formal aspects of royal succession, but the preservation of values and traditions that truly matter. She was impressed by Catherine's ability to connect with people from all backgrounds while maintaining appropriate dignity. Victoria listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed her own deep understanding of palace dynamics. Isabella began to suspect that the queen consort might have had similar concerns about Catherine's position within the family hierarchy and could see the wisdom in Eleanor's decision. "There's another consideration," Victoria said eventually. "Catherine's relationship with the younger generation of royals in other European families. She's developed quite a network of contacts through her charitable work." Isabella hadn't considered this diplomatic angle, but Victoria was right. Catherine's approachable personality and genuine commitment to social causes had earned her respect among her international peers, creating opportunities for informal diplomacy that could benefit the entire kingdom. The sapphires would certainly enhance her presence at international events, Isabella agreed. Victoria set down her teacup and walked back to the desk where the jewelry case remained open. She reached out to touch one of the smaller brooches, a delicate piece featuring sapphires arranged in the shape of a flowering vine. "Eleanor wore this to my wedding," Victoria said softly. "It was the first time I had seen the full collection, and I remember thinking how perfectly it complemented her dignity and authority." There was something wistful in Victoria's tone that surprised Isabella. She had always viewed the queen consort as primarily concerned with protocol and position, but this moment revealed a more personal connection to Eleanor's memory. She would be pleased to know that the collection will continue to serve important purposes, Isabella offered. "Yes," Victoria agreed. "Though I suspect she would also be amused by the discussions this decision will generate among the extended family." Both women understood that the transfer of the sapphires would be noticed and analyzed by every member of the royal family and their closest advisors. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and various noble houses that maintained connections to the monarchy would all have opinions about the precedent being established. "Catherine will need to be prepared for that attention," Victoria observed. "She's stronger than many people realize," Isabella replied. Eleanor saw that strength and wanted to nurture it. As the morning progressed, the two women continued their discussion, working through the practical implications of Eleanor's decision and developing strategies for presenting it to the broader family. Isabella was surprised by Victoria's collaborative approach, having expected more resistance to a decision that could be seen as diminishing her own status. Eventually, Victoria excused herself to attend to other obligations, but not before expressing her support for honoring Eleanor's wishes. As Isabella prepared to close the jewelry case and continue with her mission, she reflected on the unexpected alliance that had formed during their conversation. The sapphires seemed to catch the light differently now, as though they approved of the path forward. Isabella carefully arranged each piece in its designated compartment, knowing that the next time they emerged, they would mark the beginning of a new chapter in the family's history. Catherine would need time to understand the full significance of her grandmother's gift, but Isabella was confident that she would rise to meet the expectations that came with wearing the Thornfield sapphires. As she prepared to leave Eleanor's study, Isabella took one final look around the room that had witnessed so many important family decisions. The portraits of previous monarchs seemed to nod their approval, and she felt certain that Queen Mother Eleanor would be pleased with how her final wishes were being honored. The morning mist had lifted from the palace grounds, revealing the full beauty of the elaborate gardens and the ancient architecture that had sheltered generations of royal families. Isabella made her way toward Catherine's private apartments, carrying with her not just a jewelry case, but the weight of tradition, the promise of change, and the hope that Eleanor's faith in her granddaughter would prove to be well-founded. Princess Catherine sat in her private sitting room, surrounded by correspondents from various charitable organizations and diplomatic contacts, when she heard the familiar knock that announced Lady Isabella's arrival. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows cast dancing patterns across the Persian carpets and highlighted the fresh flowers that Catherine insisted on having throughout her apartments, despite the palace staff's preference for more formal decorative arrangements. Catherine had inherited her love of natural beauty from Queen Mother Eleanor, along with an appreciation for simplicity that set her apart from the more elaborate tastes that characterized much of royal life. Her sitting room reflected this preference, with comfortable furniture arranged to encourage conversation rather than ceremony, and personal photographs mixed among the formal portraits that protocol required. "Please, come in," Catherine called, setting aside the letter she had been reviewing from the director of the children's literacy program she had recently established. She rose to greet Isabella with the genuine warmth that had endeared her to family members and palace staff alike. Isabella entered carrying the familiar velvet jewelry case, and Catherine's attention was immediately drawn to it. She had seen her grandmother handle that particular case countless times during the years when Eleanor had remained active in royal functions. The sight of it now brought a mixture of nostalgia and curiosity. "I have something that belonged to your grandmother," Isabella said, her voice carrying an emotion that Catherine couldn't quite identify. "Something she specifically wanted you to have." Catherine felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with confusion. Eleanor had already distributed most of her personal belongings in the months before her death, and Catherine had received several meaningful items, including a collection of first-edition poetry books and Eleanor's personal correspondence with various world leaders. She couldn't imagine what else her grandmother might have set aside for her. Isabella placed the case on the coffee table that separated them and opened it with careful reverence. As the sapphires caught the afternoon light, Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. She had seen these pieces countless times, always adorning Eleanor during the most important state occasions, and she knew immediately the significance of what she was witnessing. "The Thornfield sapphires," Catherine whispered, unable to keep the amazement from her voice. "Your grandmother left specific instructions that they should come to you," Isabella explained. "She felt that you embodied the values and dedication that these pieces represent." Catherine sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what she was hearing. The sapphires weren't just jewelry, they were symbols of royal authority and tradition. For Eleanor to have chosen her over the established protocol represented an extraordinary gesture of confidence and trust. "But they should go to Victoria," Catherine said, her natural sense of propriety causing her to voice the obvious concern. "She's the queen consort." Isabella had anticipated this response. Catherine's consideration for others was one of the qualities that had impressed Eleanor most, but it also sometimes prevented her from fully accepting the recognition she deserved. "Your grandmother was very deliberate in her decision," Isabella explained. "She spent considerable time thinking about who would best honor the legacy these pieces represent. She wasn't interested in following protocol for its own sake, but rather in ensuring that the sapphires would continue to serve important purposes." Catherine reached out tentatively to touch the main necklace, feeling the weight and coolness of the stones. She remembered watching Eleanor prepare for state dinners, the ritual of selecting jewelry that would complement both her gown and the diplomatic message she wanted to convey. The sapphires had been reserved for the most significant occasions, when Eleanor needed to project both elegance and authority. "I've spoken with Victoria," Isabella continued. "She supports Eleanor's decision and recognizes the wisdom behind it." This information surprised Catherine more than anything else. She had expected Victoria to have strong feelings about being bypassed in the traditional line of inheritance, and the Queen Consort's support suggested a level of family unity that Catherine hadn't anticipated. "What did she say?" Catherine asked. "She acknowledged your contributions to the family's charitable work and recognized that you've developed important relationships within the international community. She also understood Eleanor's desire to ensure that these pieces would be worn by someone who truly appreciated their significance." Catherine stood and walked to one of the windows, looking out at the gardens where she had spent countless hours walking with Eleanor during the older woman's final years. Those conversations had covered everything from family history to political philosophy, with Eleanor sharing insights that had shaped Catherine's understanding of her role within the monarchy. "Grandmother never told me about this decision," Catherine said. "She wanted it to be a surprise. She was concerned that if you knew about her intentions, you might try to dissuade her out of consideration for family dynamics." Catherine smiled at this assessment, recognizing the accuracy of Eleanor's prediction. She would indeed have worried about creating tension within the family and might have encouraged Eleanor to follow traditional protocols regardless of personal preferences. "She knew me well," Catherine acknowledged. As she contemplated the gift, Catherine began to understand the deeper implications of Eleanor's decision. The sapphires would provide her with a powerful symbol during public appearances, particularly for charitable events and diplomatic functions. They would also send a clear message about her status within the family hierarchy, potentially opening doors that had previously remained closed. "There's something else," Isabella said. Eleanor left a letter explaining her reasoning. She wanted you to understand her perspective fully. Isabella withdrew a sealed envelope from her handbag, and Catherine recognized Eleanor's distinctive handwriting on the outside. She accepted the letter with trembling hands, knowing that it would contain Eleanor's final thoughts about their relationship and her hopes for Catherine's future. The letter was written on Eleanor's personal stationery, with the family crest embossed at the top. Catherine settled back into her chair and began to read, hearing Eleanor's voice in every carefully chosen word. "My dearest Catherine," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then Isabella has successfully delivered the Thornfield sapphires to you, and you are undoubtedly questioning whether you deserve such a significant inheritance. Let me assure you that my decision was made after careful consideration of what would best serve our family and our kingdom. Over the years, I have watched you develop into a woman of remarkable character and capability. Your dedication to charitable work is not merely dutiful obligation, but genuine passion for making a positive difference in people's lives. Your ability to connect with individuals from all backgrounds while maintaining appropriate dignity is a rare gift that will serve you well in the years ahead. The sapphires have been worn by queens and consorts for over a century, but they have never been worn by someone who understands their true significance as deeply as you do. When I wore them to state occasions, I was representing not just our family, but the ideals and values that our monarchy claims to uphold. You have demonstrated that you share those ideals and have the courage to act upon them. I know that some family members may question my decision to bypass traditional protocols, but I am confident that time will prove the wisdom of this choice. You have the strength to handle any criticism and the grace to wear these pieces with appropriate humility. More importantly, you have the vision to use them in service of causes that truly matter. The sapphires are not merely ornamental. They are tools that can help you accomplish important work. When you wear them to charitable events, they will command attention and respect that can benefit your fundraising efforts. When you wear them to diplomatic functions, they will signal your status and authority within our family. When you wear them to cultural events, they will represent our kingdom's commitment to preserving and celebrating beauty and tradition. I am particularly pleased that you will be able to wear them as you expand your work with the Educational Foundation. The contrast between the elegance of the sapphires and the humble circumstances of the children you serve will create a powerful visual message about our family's commitment to social responsibility. Please do not feel burdened by this inheritance. Instead, see it as confirmation of what I have always believed about your potential. You have the intelligence, compassion, and strength to carry forward the best traditions of our family while adapting them to meet contemporary challenges. Wear the sapphires with pride, my dear granddaughter. They belong with you. With all my love and confidence, Grandmother Eleanor. Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes as she finished reading the letter. Eleanor's words captured perfectly the mixture of honor and responsibility that came with such a significant gift. The letter also revealed the depth of thought that had gone into the decision and the confidence that Eleanor had placed in Catherine's character and abilities. She understood exactly how I would feel, Catherine said, looking up at Isabella. Eleanor always had remarkable insight into people's motivations and concerns. She wanted to ensure that you wouldn't doubt her decision or your worthiness to receive such an important inheritance. Catherine refolded the letter carefully and set it aside, then turned her attention back to the sapphires. The afternoon light had shifted, creating different patterns of reflection and color within the stones. She tried to imagine herself wearing the pieces at various occasions, feeling both excited by the possibilities and humbled by the responsibility. "When should I wear them for the first time?" Catherine asked. The charity gala next month would be appropriate, Isabella suggested. It's a significant event that aligns with Eleanor's vision for how you would use these pieces. The gala was indeed an important occasion. Catherine had been working for months to organize a fundraising event for the Children's Literacy Foundation, with proceeds going toward establishing libraries in underserved communities. Several international dignitaries had agreed to attend, along with prominent philanthropists and cultural figures. The press coverage would be substantial, Catherine observed. Which is exactly what your charitable work needs, Isabella replied. Eleanor understood that effective philanthropy requires public attention and support. The sapphires will ensure that your message receives the coverage it deserves. As they continued to discuss the practical implications of Eleanor's gift, Catherine began to feel more confident about accepting the inheritance. The letter had addressed her concerns about family dynamics and protocol, while Isabella's conversation with Victoria had demonstrated that the decision was being received more positively than expected. I should write to Victoria personally, Catherine decided. I want to thank her for her support and ensure that she understands my appreciation for her graciousness. That would be very appropriate, Isabella agreed. Victoria will appreciate the gesture, and it will help reinforce the family unity that Eleanor hoped this decision would strengthen. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside interrupted their conversation. Catherine's private secretary, Miss Helen Worthington, appeared in the doorway with an apologetic expression. Your Highness, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Lord Chancellor Morrison has arrived for your scheduled appointment regarding the Foundation's legal structure. Catherine had completely forgotten about the meeting in her absorption with Eleanor's gift. Lord Chancellor Morrison was helping her establish the proper legal framework for the expanded charitable activity she was planning, and his expertise was essential for ensuring that everything proceeded according to appropriate regulations. Please ask him to wait in the formal reception room, Catherine instructed. I'll be with him in a few minutes. After Miss Worthington departed, Catherine turned back to Isabella with a mixture of excitement and determination in her expression. This feels like perfect timing, Catherine said. I'm meeting with the Lord Chancellor about expanding the Foundation's activities, and now I have the means to make a more significant impact than I ever imagined possible. Isabella smiled at Catherine's enthusiasm. This was exactly the response that Eleanor had hoped for, not overwhelming gratitude or self-doubt, but immediate recognition of how the gift could serve larger purposes. Eleanor would be delighted to see your reaction, Isabella said. She always believed that you would use any resources you received in service of important causes. As Isabella prepared to leave, Catherine carefully closed the jewelry case and secured it in her personal safe. The sapphires would remain there until the charity gala, giving her time to plan exactly how she would present them to the world and the message she wanted to convey about her family's values and commitment to social responsibility. Thank you for carrying out grandmother's wishes, Catherine said as she walked Isabella to the door. This gift means more to me than I can express, not just for its beauty and value, but for what it represents about her faith in my abilities. She was never wrong about people's character, Isabella replied. I'm confident that you'll honor her trust in ways that exceed even her expectations. After Isabella departed, Catherine sat quietly in her sitting room for several minutes, contemplating the transformation that had just occurred in her life. The presence of the sapphires in her safe represented a new level of responsibility and opportunity, but also a confirmation of her place within the family hierarchy that she had never expected. When she finally made her way to meet with Lord Chancellor Morrison, Catherine carried herself with a new sense of purpose and authority. The charitable foundation she was building would benefit not just from her passion and dedication, but from the prestige and attention that came with wearing the Thornfield sapphires. Eleanor's final gift had provided her with tools that would amplify her ability to make a positive difference in the world, and Catherine was determined to use those tools wisely and effectively. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as Catherine entered the formal reception room where Lord Chancellor Morrison waited, and she felt as though the light itself was different somehow, charged with new possibilities and the promise of important work ahead. The news of the sapphire inheritance spread through the palace with the swift efficiency that characterized all significant family developments. Within hours of Isabella's delivery, various members of the extended royal family had learned about Queen Mother Eleanor's decision, and their reactions ranged from surprised approval to barely concealed resentment. The palace corridors buzzed with whispered conversations as relatives, advisors, and staff members processed the implications of such an unprecedented breach of protocol. Princess Beatrice, Eleanor's younger sister and the family's unofficial keeper of traditions, was among the first to express her concerns. At 82, Beatrice had witnessed nearly every significant family event of the past 6 decades, and she prided herself on her encyclopedic knowledge of royal customs and precedents. Her reaction to news of Catherine's inheritance was swift and decisive. "This is absolutely unprecedented," Beatrice declared during an impromptu meeting in her private drawing room, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent her entire life defending established protocols. "The Thornfield sapphires have passed to the senior female member of the family for over a century. Eleanor may have had the legal right to dispose of her personal property as she chose, but that doesn't make her decision appropriate." Lady Margaret Thornfield, a distant cousin who served as the family's genealogist and historical advisor, nodded in agreement. Margaret had devoted her career to documenting royal traditions and ensuring that proper protocols were maintained across generations. She found Eleanor's decision particularly troubling because of the precedent it might establish. "If we begin allowing personal preferences to override established customs, where does it end?" Margaret asked. "Royal jewelry, estate properties, titles and responsibilities, all of these things exist within carefully structured systems that have served our family well for centuries." However, not everyone shared their concerns. Prince Alexander, Catherine's father and Isabella's husband, had received the news with considerable pride and satisfaction. He had long believed that Catherine's contributions to the family deserved greater recognition, and he saw Eleanor's decision as validation of his daughter's character and potential. "Mother always had excellent judgment about people," Alexander told Isabella as they discussed the situation in their private study. "Catherine has earned this recognition through years of dedicated service to charitable causes and her genuine commitment to representing our family's values." Alexander's support was particularly significant because of his position as second in line to the throne and his respected voice within family councils. His endorsement of Eleanor's decision would carry considerable weight with other family members who might be wavering in their opinions. Meanwhile, Queen Consort Victoria found herself in an unexpectedly complex position. While she had expressed support for Eleanor's decision during her conversation with Isabella, she was also aware that some family members viewed her acquiescence as a sign of weakness or insufficient commitment to traditional protocols. She needed to navigate carefully between honoring Eleanor's wishes and maintaining her own authority within the family hierarchy. Victoria's approach was characteristically strategic. Rather than engaging in public debates about the appropriateness of Eleanor's decision, she chose to focus on the positive implications for the family's public image and charitable activities. During a carefully orchestrated conversation with several key family advisors, she positioned herself as supportive of any initiative that would enhance the monarchy's reputation for social responsibility. "Catherine has demonstrated remarkable effectiveness in her charitable work," Victoria observed during a meeting with the family's public relations team. "If wearing the sapphires helps her attract more attention and support for those causes, then we should view Eleanor's decision as strategically sound rather than merely sentimental." This framing allowed Victoria to support Catherine while also demonstrating her own commitment to the family's broader interests. It also provided a model for how other family members could respond to questions about the inheritance without appearing to criticize Eleanor's judgment or undermine established traditions. The broader staff of Thornfield Palace watched these developments with keen interest, understanding that changes in family dynamics often had practical implications for their daily responsibilities. Margaret Fairfield, the head of household staff, had already begun making discreet inquiries about the protocol for maintaining and displaying the sapphires now that they were part of Catherine's personal collection rather than the official crown jewels. "These pieces will require special security arrangements when Her Highness travels," Margaret explained to her senior staff during their weekly planning meeting. "We'll also need to coordinate with her personal dresser to ensure proper care and storage." The practical aspects of the inheritance were indeed complex. The sapphires had previously been maintained by the same specialists who cared for the official crown jewels, with elaborate security protocols governing their movement and display. Catherine's ownership created new logistical challenges that would require careful planning and coordination among various palace departments. As word of the inheritance began to reach circles beyond the immediate royal family, the response from aristocratic society was mixed but generally favorable. Many noble families had observed Catherine's charitable work with approval, and they saw the sapphire inheritance as appropriate recognition for her dedication and effectiveness. The fact that Queen Mother Eleanor had made the decision personally added weight to its legitimacy within traditional social circles. Lady Penelope Ashford, one of the kingdom's most prominent philanthropists and a longtime supporter of royal charitable initiatives, expressed her enthusiasm for Catherine's inheritance during a private dinner party attended by several influential society figures. Princess Catherine has brought a fresh energy to charitable work that we haven't seen in years, Lady Ashford observed. She understands that modern philanthropy requires both genuine commitment and effective presentation. The sapphires will provide her with the symbolic authority to attract support from donors who might not otherwise engage with royal charities. This perspective was shared by many within the philanthropic community who had worked with Catherine on various projects. They had witnessed her ability to connect with individuals from diverse backgrounds while maintaining the dignity and authority appropriate to her position. The addition of the sapphires to her public appearances promised to enhance her effectiveness in ways that could benefit numerous charitable causes. However, the inheritance also created new pressures and expectations for Catherine herself. As news of Eleanor's gift became more widely known, she found herself facing increased scrutiny from both supporters and critics. The media began speculating about when she would first wear the sapphires publicly and what message she intended to convey about her role within the royal family. Catherine's private secretary, Miss Helen Worthington, found her schedule suddenly filled with requests for interviews and public appearances. Fashion magazines wanted to feature the sapphires in photo spreads, charitable organizations sought her involvement in their events, and diplomatic contacts expressed interest in arranging meetings that would showcase the kingdom's commitment to international cooperation. "We need to be strategic about how we handle this attention," Helen advised during one of their planning sessions. "Every public appearance will now be analyzed for what it reveals about family dynamics and future intentions." Catherine appreciated Helen's practical approach to managing the increased interest, but she also felt the weight of new responsibilities that came with wearing such historically significant jewelry. She understood that the sapphires would transform her from a peripheral member of the royal family into a central figure whose choices and actions would be scrutinized by media and public alike. The pressure intensified when several international media outlets picked up the story and began speculating about its broader implications. Royal correspondents from neighboring kingdoms analyzed Eleanor's decision for what it revealed about succession planning and family relationships. Some interpreted the inheritance as a sign that Catherine was being positioned for greater responsibilities within the monarchy, while others saw it simply as recognition of her charitable work. These international perspectives added complexity to what had initially seemed like a straightforward family matter. Catherine found herself receiving congratulatory messages from royal families across Europe, many of whom had worked with her on charitable initiatives and were pleased to see her elevated status recognized through such a significant inheritance. Princess Sophia of Denmark, who had collaborated with Catherine on several educational projects, sent a particularly warm letter expressing her delight about the sapphire inheritance and her hope that it would enable Catherine to expand her charitable work even further. "Your dedication to improving children's education has inspired similar efforts here in Denmark," Sophia wrote. "I know that wearing Queen Mother Eleanor's sapphires will provide you with even greater opportunities to advocate for these important causes on the international stage." Such messages helped Catherine understand that Eleanor's decision was being viewed favorably within the broader European royal community, where her charitable work had earned respect and admiration. This international support provided her with additional confidence as she prepared to navigate the increased attention that would come with her new status. As the weeks following the inheritance progressed, Catherine began to develop a clearer vision of how she wanted to use the sapphires to advance her charitable work. She met regularly with her team of advisors to plan strategic appearances that would maximize both the symbolic impact of wearing the pieces and the practical benefits for her various causes. The upcoming charity gala represented the perfect opportunity to debut the sapphires in a setting that aligned perfectly with Eleanor's vision for their use. Catherine worked closely with event planners to ensure that every aspect of her appearance would reinforce the message about the royal family's commitment to social responsibility and charitable giving. "The gala will set the tone for how the public understands this inheritance," Catherine explained to her team during one of their preparation meetings. "We want to demonstrate that the sapphires aren't just beautiful jewelry, but symbols of our family's dedication to making a positive difference in people's lives." This approach reflected the lessons that Catherine had learned from her years of working with Eleanor on charitable projects. The older woman had always emphasized the importance of using royal symbols and ceremonies to advance substantive causes rather than merely maintaining traditions for their own sake. As Catherine prepared for her first public appearance wearing the Thornfield sapphires, she felt both excitement about the opportunities ahead and deep appreciation for the trust that Eleanor had placed in her abilities. The inheritance represented more than just beautiful jewelry, it was a mandate to continue and expand the charitable work that had become her passion and purpose. The sapphires themselves seemed to carry the accumulated wisdom and experience of all the remarkable women who had worn them before. As Catherine practiced wearing the pieces during private fittings with her dresser, she felt connected to a legacy of service and dedication that stretched back through generations of royal history. The night before the charity gala, Catherine sat in her private sitting room and carefully reviewed Eleanor's letter one more time. The words provided both comfort and inspiration as she prepared to step into a more prominent role within the royal family and the broader community of individuals working to address social challenges. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one in which the Thornfield sapphires would serve as both symbol and tool in her efforts to honor Eleanor's legacy while creating her own path forward in service to causes that truly mattered. The evening of the charity gala arrived with the crisp elegance that characterized early autumn at Thornfield Palace. The ballroom had been transformed into a showcase of refined luxury, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables adorned with white roses and silver accents. Distinguished guests from across Europe and beyond had gathered to support Catherine's Children's Literacy Foundation, but the underlying excitement centered on what everyone knew would be the first public appearance of the Thornfield sapphires since Queen Mother Eleanor's death. Catherine stood before the full-length mirror in her dressing room, watching as her personal dresser, Mrs. Adelaide Pemberton, made final adjustments to the sapphire necklace. The weight of the pieces felt both familiar and foreign, familiar because she had seen them countless times on her grandmother, foreign because they now belonged to her and carried with them all the expectations and responsibilities that such ownership implied. "The fit is perfect, Your Highness," Mrs. Pemberton observed with professional satisfaction. Queen Mother Eleanor had excellent judgment about proportions and balance. The dress Catherine had chosen for the evening was a creation by one of the kingdom's most respected designers, crafted in deep midnight blue silk that provided the perfect backdrop for the sapphire's brilliant color. The gown's elegant lines emphasized the jewelry without competing with it, creating a harmonious presentation that would photograph beautifully for the media coverage that was certain to follow. As Catherine examined her reflection, she thought about Eleanor's letter and the guidance it contained about using the sapphires as tools rather than merely ornaments. Tonight's gala represented the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that philosophy, with proceeds from the event supporting the establishment of libraries in underserved communities throughout the kingdom. "Mrs. Pemberton," Catherine said, "what do you think Grandmother would say about tonight?" The older woman paused in her work, considering the question with the thoughtfulness that came from decades of service to the royal family. Mrs. Pemberton had assisted Eleanor during countless formal occasions and understood better than most the significance of the sapphire's appearance tonight. "I believe she would be tremendously proud, Your Highness. Queen Mother Eleanor always said that true elegance came from using beauty and privilege in service of meaningful purposes. Tonight embodies that philosophy perfectly." The sound of gentle knocking interrupted their conversation, and Miss Helen Worthington appeared in the doorway with a final briefing about the evening's schedule and the distinguished guests who would be in attendance. "Prince Wilhelm of Austria has arrived, along with the Danish delegation and representatives from the International Children's Education Council," Helen reported. "The media presence is substantial but manageable, and Lord Chancellor Morrison confirms that all legal documentation for the Foundation's expansion has been completed successfully." Catherine felt a flutter of nervous anticipation as she reviewed the list of attendees. Many were individuals she had worked with on charitable projects over the years, but tonight's gathering represented a new level of visibility and importance for her activities. The sapphires would signal to everyone present that her work had achieved a new level of recognition and support within the royal family. "Any word from the family?" Catherine asked. "King Richard and Queen Consort Victoria will arrive together, and Prince Alexander has confirmed his attendance along with Lady Isabella. Princess Beatrice sent her regrets but included a warm personal note expressing her support for the Foundation's mission." This news surprised Catherine, as she had expected some family tensions around her first public appearance wearing the controversial inheritance. Beatrice's supportive message suggested that even the family's most traditional members were choosing to focus on the positive aspects of Eleanor's decision rather than the protocol questions it raised. As Catherine prepared to make her entrance into the ballroom, she felt a profound sense of connection to her grandmother and to the legacy of service that the sapphires represented. The jewelry felt alive against her skin, as though it carried within it the accumulated experiences of all the remarkable occasions where it had been worn in service of important causes. The ballroom fell into a respectful hush as Catherine entered, accompanied by the gentle strains of a string quartet that had been carefully positioned to provide appropriate musical accompaniment. The sapphires caught the light from multiple chandeliers, creating a display of brilliance that drew every eye in the room while somehow managing to enhance rather than overshadow Catherine's natural poise and warmth. Prince Wilhelm of Austria, a longtime supporter of educational initiatives, was among the first to approach Catherine with congratulations on both the inheritance and the evening's charitable mission. His presence lent international legitimacy to the event and demonstrated the broad support that Catherine's work had earned within European diplomatic circles. "Your Highness," Prince Wilhelm said with genuine enthusiasm, "the sapphires suit you perfectly, and I understand they're being worn in support of a truly worthy cause. Queen Mother Eleanor would be delighted to see them used in such a meaningful way." Similar sentiments were expressed throughout the evening as Catherine moved gracefully among the guests, using the attention drawn by the sapphires to engage supporters in detailed conversations about the foundation's goals and achievements. She discovered that the jewelry served exactly the purpose that Eleanor had envisioned, creating opportunities for substantial discussions about important issues rather than merely attracting superficial attention. Lady Margaret Sinclair, one of the kingdom's most influential philanthropists, spent considerable time discussing the foundation's plans for international expansion, noting that Catherine's elevated status within the royal family would open doors that had previously remained closed. "The combination of your personal commitment and the symbolic authority of the sapphires creates unprecedented opportunities," Lady Sinclair observed. "I foresee partnerships with educational organizations throughout Europe that could transform how we approach children's literacy on an international scale." As the evening progressed, Catherine began to understand the full implications of Eleanor's gift. The sapphires weren't just beautiful jewelry, they were instruments of influence that could amplify her voice and attract resources for causes that desperately needed support. Every conversation, every photograph, every moment of attention generated by her appearance wearing the pieces created new possibilities for advancing the foundation's mission. The formal program for the evening included presentations by several children who had benefited from the foundation's existing programs. As Catherine listened to their stories of transformation through access to books and education, she felt the weight of the sapphires differently, not as burden or privilege, but as responsibility to ensure that such opportunities became available to many more children. When Catherine took the stage to address the assembled guests, the sapphires caught the spotlight in a way that created an almost ethereal effect. But, rather than allowing the jewelry to distract from her message, she used its presence to reinforce her points about the enduring value of education and the responsibility that came with privilege. "Tonight, we gather wearing our finest clothing and most precious jewelry to support children who lack access to something far more valuable, the transformative power of literacy," Catherine said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the ballroom. "These sapphires have been worn at royal occasions for over a century, but they have never been worn in service of a more important cause than the one that brings us together this evening." The response was immediate and enthusiastic, with sustained applause that seemed to reflect not just approval of her words but recognition of the deeper significance of the moment. Catherine had successfully transformed what could have been a controversy about protocol into a celebration of charitable purpose and family unity. King Richard, who had watched the evening's events with careful attention, approached Catherine after her speech to express his personal approval of how she had handled both the inheritance and its public debut. "Your grandmother chose well," he said quietly, his words carrying the authority of someone who had observed royal protocol for decades. "You've managed to honor both tradition and innovation tonight, which is exactly what our family needs as we adapt to contemporary challenges while preserving our essential values." Queen Consort Victoria echoed these sentiments, noting that Catherine's approach to wearing the sapphires had enhanced rather than threatened the dignity of the royal family. Her support was particularly meaningful because it demonstrated that the family was presenting a united front despite the unconventional circumstances of the inheritance. As the evening drew to a close, Catherine reflected on the transformation that had occurred not just in her own status, but in her understanding of how symbolic authority could be used to advance substantive goals. The charity gala had raised more funds than any previous foundation event, attracted new international supporters, and generated media coverage that would extend the reach of their educational mission far beyond anything they had previously achieved. The sapphires had performed exactly as Eleanor had predicted. They had commanded attention, conveyed authority, and created opportunities for meaningful engagement with supporters and potential partners. But, more importantly, they had done so in a way that felt authentic to Catherine's own values and vision for her role within the royal family. Late that evening, as Mrs. Pemberton carefully removed the sapphires and returned them to their protective case, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for Eleanor's wisdom and foresight. The inheritance had provided her with tools that would enable her to accomplish far more than she had ever imagined possible, but it had also confirmed her grandmother's faith in her character and judgment. "Mrs. Pemberton," Catherine said as the older woman completed her work, "I think grandmother would have been pleased with tonight." "Indeed she would, Your Highness." Queen Mother Eleanor always believed that true nobility was demonstrated through service to others. Tonight proved that belief was well-founded. As Catherine prepared for bed, she reviewed the evening's events with a sense of accomplishment tempered by awareness of the responsibilities that lay ahead. The successful debut of the Sapphires had established her as a more prominent figure within both the royal family and the broader philanthropic community, but it had also created expectations that would require careful management and continued dedication. The international media coverage that followed the gala exceeded all expectations, with fashion magazines, society publications, and news outlets throughout Europe featuring photographs and stories about Catherine's appearance and the Foundation's mission. The combination of the historical significance of the Sapphires and the contemporary relevance of her charitable work created a narrative that captured public imagination in ways that pure protocol events rarely achieved. More importantly, the gala had generated concrete results in terms of funding commitments, partnership agreements, and volunteer recruitment that would enable the foundation to expand its activities significantly. Several international organizations expressed interest in collaborating on educational initiatives, and multiple donors committed to supporting the establishment of libraries in underserved communities. As Catherine fell asleep that night, she felt the presence of Eleanor's spirit, approving of how the Sapphires had been used and confident that they would continue to serve important purposes in the years ahead. The inheritance had transformed from a beautiful but potentially controversial gift into a powerful instrument for positive change, exactly as Eleanor had envisioned when she made her unconventional decision to bypass traditional protocols in favor of recognizing genuine merit and potential. The Thornfield Sapphires had begun their new chapter in service to causes that would have made all their previous royal wearers proud, and Catherine understood that tonight marked not an ending but a beginning of possibilities that stretched far beyond anything she had previously imagined. 6 months after the charity gala, the transformative impact of Queen Mother Eleanor's decision had become undeniably clear to everyone within the royal family and the broader aristocratic community. Catherine's careful stewardship of the Thornfield Sapphires had not only validated Eleanor's judgment but had also established new precedents for how royal symbols could be used to advance meaningful causes while strengthening rather than undermining traditional institutions. The spring morning found Catherine in her expanded private office, which had been reorganized to accommodate the growing administrative needs of her charitable foundation. Maps of proposed library locations covered one wall, while correspondence from international educational organizations filled several filing cabinets that hadn't existed before her inheritance of the Sapphires. The transformation of her workspace reflected the broader changes that had occurred in her role and responsibilities within the royal family. Miss Helen Worthington entered with the morning briefings, but her report focused less on social engagements than on substantive policy discussions and strategic planning sessions with government ministers and international development organizations. Catherine's calendar had evolved to reflect her new status as a key figure in the kingdom's diplomatic and philanthropic activities. The education minister would like to schedule a meeting about incorporating the foundation's literacy programs into the national curriculum, Helen reported. Additionally, Princess Sophia of Denmark has confirmed her participation in next month's International Conference on Childhood Education, and the Swiss delegation has requested a private audience to discuss collaborative funding for Alpine region schools. These developments represented exactly the kind of expanded influence that Eleanor had anticipated when she chose Catherine to inherit the Sapphires. The jewelry's symbolic authority had opened doors to policy discussions and international partnerships that would have been difficult to achieve through charitable work alone, no matter how dedicated or effective. Catherine's relationship with Queen Consort Victoria had also evolved in unexpected and positive directions. Rather than creating division within the family, Eleanor's unconventional decision had fostered a collaborative partnership between the two women that leveraged their different strengths and interests. Victoria's expertise in diplomatic protocol complemented Catherine's passion for charitable work, creating opportunities for initiatives that served both humanitarian and political purposes. Victoria and I have been discussing the possibility of a joint visit to the refugee education centers in the border regions, Catherine explained to Helen as they reviewed the week's schedule. The combination of her official diplomatic status and the attention generated by the Sapphires could bring significant international attention to funding needs. This kind of strategic cooperation had surprised many observers who had expected Eleanor's decision to create lasting tensions between family members. Instead, it had encouraged a more flexible approach to royal responsibilities that allowed different individuals to contribute according to their particular talents and interests while maintaining overall family unity. The success of Catherine's stewardship had also influenced how other family members approached their own charitable activities. Prince Alexander had expanded his environmental conservation work, drawing inspiration from his daughter's effective use of symbolic authority to advance substantive causes. Even Princess Beatrice had begun incorporating some of Catherine's innovative approaches into her traditional cultural preservation activities. The family dinner last week was remarkable, Catherine confided to Isabella during one of their regular consultation meetings. Instead of the usual discussions about protocol and precedent, we spent most of the evening sharing ideas about how our various charitable activities could complement and support each other. Isabella smiled at this report, remembering her concerns about potential family discord when she had first delivered the sapphires to Catherine. Eleanor's gamble on family adaptability and Catherine's graceful handling of her new responsibilities had created positive changes that extended far beyond the immediate inheritance. The international response to Catherine's work had exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Educational organizations throughout Europe had begun adopting programs modeled on the Foundation's approaches, and several governments had committed to increased funding for literacy initiatives inspired by the kingdom's example. The sapphires had become symbols not just of royal authority but of international cooperation in addressing social challenges. Ambassador Patricia Fitzgerald from the International Education Council visited Catherine regularly to discuss coordination among various national and international programs. During their most recent meeting, she had expressed amazement at how effectively Catherine had leveraged her inherited status to achieve concrete results. "Your approach has revolutionized how we think about the relationship between symbolic authority and practical philanthropy," Ambassador Fitzgerald observed. "The combination of genuine expertise, royal prestige, and beautiful presentation has proven remarkably effective at generating both financial support and policy changes." This recognition had led to Catherine being invited to address the United Nations Educational Council, an honor that reflected her emerging status as a significant voice in international development circles. The invitation represented a level of recognition that would have been unlikely for a peripheral royal family member but was entirely appropriate for someone whose work had achieved such substantial results. As Catherine prepared for this address, she spent considerable time reviewing Eleanor's letter and reflecting on the guidance it contained about using privilege responsibly. The UN appearance would represent the culmination of everything Eleanor had hoped to achieve through her unconventional inheritance decision. "I want to make sure that my remarks honor both the specific legacy of the sapphires and the broader principles that guided grandmother's thinking," Catherine explained to her speechwriting team. "This isn't just about our family's charitable work, but about how traditional institutions can adapt to serve contemporary needs while preserving their essential values." The speechwriting process revealed the depth of Catherine's intellectual engagement with the philosophical questions that surrounded her role. She had evolved from someone who participated in charitable activities out of duty and inclination into a thoughtful advocate who understood the complex relationships between symbolism, authority, and social change. The sapphires themselves had become integral to Catherine's public identity in ways that felt both natural and strategic. Rather than wearing them only for the most formal occasions, she had begun incorporating individual pieces into various appearances, creating a subtle but consistent visual reminder of her status and the values she represented. The approach had proven remarkably effective at maintaining public attention for her causes without appearing ostentatious or inappropriate. Fashion magazines regularly featured articles about Catherine's innovative approaches to wearing historic jewelry, noting how she had managed to make century-old pieces appear contemporary and relevant. More importantly, charity organizations reported increased donations and volunteer participation following events where Catherine appeared wearing the sapphires, confirming Eleanor's prediction about their practical value for fundraising activities. The success had also created new challenges that required careful management. Catherine's increased prominence had attracted attention from various political groups who hoped to associate themselves with her charitable work for their own purposes. She had needed to develop sophisticated strategies for maintaining the independence and nonpartisan character of her foundation while acknowledging legitimate governmental interests in educational policy. "The key is remembering that the foundation's mission comes first," Catherine explained to her advisory board during one of their strategic planning sessions. "We can work with government agencies and political leaders when it serves our goals, but we must never allow political considerations to compromise our charitable objectives." This kind of nuanced thinking reflected the maturity that Catherine had developed in handling the complex responsibilities that came with her inheritance. Eleanor's faith in her character and judgment had been vindicated through months of successful navigation of challenging situations that required both principle and pragmatism. The approaching first anniversary of Eleanor's death provided an opportunity to reflect on the full impact of her decision regarding the sapphires. Catherine had planned a memorial service that would celebrate Eleanor's life while also showcasing the ongoing work of the charitable foundation that had been so dramatically expanded through her inheritance. "I want the service to demonstrate how grandmother's values continue to influence our family's work," Catherine told the planning committee. "The sapphires will be worn not as memorial jewelry, but as working tools in service of causes that embody her vision for how privilege should be used." The memorial service was attended by representatives from every educational organization that had worked with Catherine's foundation, along with government ministers, international dignitaries, and family members who had been touched by Eleanor's wisdom and generosity. The gathering provided a powerful demonstration of how one person's thoughtful decision could create ripple effects that touched countless lives across multiple countries and communities. As Catherine spoke about her grandmother's legacy, wearing the full sapphire collection for the first time since the charity gala, she felt the presence of Eleanor's spirit approving of how her final gift had been used. The jewelry no longer felt like an inheritance or even a responsibility, but rather like an extension of Catherine's own commitment to the values that Eleanor had spent her lifetime advocating. "These sapphires have witnessed over a century of royal history," Catherine said in her memorial address. "But they have never been worn in service of more important work than they accomplished this past year." Grandmother understood that true nobility lies not in possessing beautiful things, but in using whatever resources we have to make the world more just and compassionate. The response from the assembled guests reflected not just appreciation for Catherine's words but recognition of the broader transformation that Eleanor's decision had catalyzed within the royal family and the institutions they influenced. The sapphires had become symbols of adaptive tradition rather than rigid protocol, demonstrating how established institutions could evolve to meet contemporary challenges while preserving their essential character. As the memorial service concluded and guests began sharing stories about Eleanor's influence on their own lives and work, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion regarding her grandmother's final gift. The Thornfield sapphires had fulfilled every expectation that Eleanor had held for their future use, and they would continue to serve important purposes for generations to come. That evening, as Catherine carefully returned the sapphires to their protective case, she thought about the letter that had explained Eleanor's reasoning and the trust it had placed in her character. The inheritance had transformed not just Catherine's public role but her understanding of how individual choices could influence broader social change when guided by clear values and strategic thinking. The sapphires would continue to be worn at charitable events, diplomatic functions, and cultural celebrations, but they would always carry with them the memory of Eleanor's wisdom and the proof that even the most established traditions could be reimagined in service of justice and compassion. Catherine had inherited more than jewelry. She had received a mandate to use privilege responsibly, and she had honored that mandate in ways that exceeded even Eleanor's ambitious hopes for the future. The Thornfield sapphires had found their perfect custodian, and their legacy would continue to grow through Catherine's ongoing commitment to the values that had guided Eleanor's remarkable life of service to others. The inheritance had created not just individual success but institutional change that would benefit countless people for years to come, proving that thoughtful tradition and innovative application could work together to create positive transformation in an imperfect world.